I think a long while ago I lost quite a bit of personal interest in the weather, except as it affects and blesses mankind or otherwise. It really, from a spiritual point of view, doesn't make much difference what kind of weather it is, whether it's a good day or a bad one. And so, as Brother Hart said here a while ago, in spite of the rain, God seems to have screened out and winnowed out those who are capable of being affected adversely by a natural baptism. And this morning I'm glad that that's so, because I'd rather have the screened and winnowed out this morning, the choice gathered group, because of the thing I'm going to talk about. The thing that I want to talk about and expand upon would not have much of an impact or have much meaning for a mere curiosity seeker. But I do believe that God is with us. Amen. And that He has given us a group this morning that will make it possible for me to go a little deeper in this subject that I anticipated going. Had it been a bright and sunny day, the chances are it would have been quite Pollyanna. But being an inclement day, I think I can say things that I wouldn't otherwise have said. I don't know how God speaks to you. I only know how He speaks to me. I never hear His voice. Only on a very few occasions have I ever had any connection or contact with God through hearing a voice. God speaks to me through deep, inner, intimate impressions. I get the impressions which I can usually quickly confirm as being from God because they are supported and authorized in God's Word. I don't accept anything in a spiritual nature, of a spiritual nature, that doesn't have the sanction of the Bible. And I mean essentially the New Testament. Unless it can be confirmed in those marvelous writers of the letters and in these four Gospels that we have here, I remain a little bit suspicious and a little bit chary as to the total truth of it. I think if a thing is totally true, then it will be sanctioned by the total truth, and Christ is the total truth. And if He sanctions it, then these inner whispers or impressions that I get, I consider to be authentic, and therefore I act upon them. Then there is another way that God speaks to me that I know is universally true. I never have any hedging about that, or any doubt about it. God speaks to me in terms of peace. If I'm praying, if I'm in prayer, or in meditation, and a deep, indescribable peace steals in upon me, I know that's God speaking. And I never have any doubt about that at all. And then God speaks to me in terms of modern parables. He is speaking in parables today the same as He did 2,000 years ago. Always He is telling these things in parables to those who have ears to hear and eyes to see. And He speaks to me in terms of symbols, actual visual symbols. These I screen out. these I have to have also the support of Scripture. I have to have them authenticated, as it were. There must come along with them an affidavit from God that this is true. For there are all kinds of spirits in the world, and the devil is so close an imitator of God that it is well nigh impossible at times to determine who really is speaking, the devil or God. The devil can imitate almost anything that God does and is, and do it so perfectly that it's almost impossible to distinguish who it is doing the speaking. So the language of symbol is a language that is written into the New Testament especially, and also the Old. And it is written into man's brain cells and into his nervous system. An imaging faculty has been given to everybody, by means of which everybody can see the image of God in the faces of passing men and women and children. And this imaging faculty, when it is corrupted, becomes the imagination. And when the devil lays hold of the imagination, he can appear as an angel of light, and he can give us also spiritual and religious symbols that can lead us into illusion and illusion. So we are warned in the Scripture to test these spirits, to see whether or not they are of God, and not just listen to every passing voice and every picture that comes along and every vision, but test it. We have to be wiser than the children of the earth in these days. And oftentimes the children of God are not nearly as wise as the children of the earth. And so it is very easy to be led astray by what seems to be the very highest and the very best. I give this little preface to this talk because of the nature of the material I'm going to deal with, and I've proved its authenticity in nearly 30 years of experience. I'm going to talk about the cross. God has written the cross into every human being. It's in our Constitution. It forms many of the organs of our body. Our body is built in the form of a cross. And when we stand with our feet together and our arms out, we are a perfect cross. And these are the outstretched arms on the cross of love. We receive here and give here. And this cross came to me as the voice of God. I was in prison at the time, and I felt that I should make some effort to study rhetoric and composition. I had had no education up to the time I had had my experience, having stopped my schooling in the 5th grade, and then through years in the underworld had lost all count of the little I had learned. And so I had a vocabulary of some 300 or 400 words perhaps, and all these were connected with underworld jargon, our slang. I was skilled in all the variations of profanity and slang, but I needed a new vocabulary in order to express and communicate the new thing that had come to me. And one of the ways that I wanted to express it was through the written word. And I discovered that without any education or knowledge or any ability to write even so much as a simple sentence, I was able to sit before the parable of the prodigal son and be perfectly aware that nowhere in all the literature of the world was there anything that had ever been created before that was perfect. Here I discovered a short story with a little group of fictional characters. I found it to contain about 500 words. I found it to contain the greatest theme in the world and to conform to the most perfect unities of creative art. And I discovered that you couldn't take a single word out and you couldn't put a single word in without marring the beauty of the picture. I discovered also that it was composed essentially of one-syllable words, 1 and 2 syllables, simplicity brought down to the ultimate extreme, every word counting, nothing extraneous, nothing to be added, nothing to be subtracted. There it was, a perfect sample and example of a great art of reporting a great theme through the medium of fiction or parabolic writing. And in the presence of that and laboriously reading it, paying no attention to the modern grammatical construction of it, its punctuation and whatnot, I took a pencil and a piece of wrapping paper, and I managed on that pattern to construct a story of 1,000 words. And I called the story, There Is Another Law. When I finished it, I got an interview with our warden and asked him if I might send that off to a publisher. And he hesitated a little bit. He said, "Don't you think it ought to be typed?" Well, I said, "I don't know that there are any typewriters available here, and I certainly wouldn't know how to operate one." "Well, maybe my secretary could do it for you." I said, "No, Warden, I wish you would let me send it just as it is on this piece of wrapping paper and scrawled out here with a pencil with all of its unspelled words and its utter lack of grammatical construction." Well, he said, "All right, but I really hope this doesn't create a precedent, because really we're not prepared here to allow anyone to write for publication." And he let me send it. And I sent it to Dorothy Hubbard, who was then chief editor on Detective Story magazine. And she got it and read it and sent me a wonderful letter and bought it and told me that she would take every word that I could write if I could do it that well. And she said, "Don't bother about the grammar. We have a large editorial office here, and there are lots of college students out of jobs, and they can do the things that you can't do. What we want is your thought, your story." And then she asked, "By the way, where did you get hold of this idea?" And I wrote back and I said I got it out of the Bible, out of the parable of the prodigal son. And she said it is shaped and formed to our magazine, although our magazine goes out to all kinds of people, religious and non-religious. Well, I was greatly enthused and inspired by that. Paid me top price for it, 3 cents a word. And then the idea came to me, I'm going to be a writer. I felt that I was already made. But I thought, now I ought to study this thing. And so I went to the warden again. And I said, Warden, I wonder if you would allow me to have a correspondence course. I have an opportunity to get one free. I can get the Palmer course in short story writing from the Palmer Institute of Authorship in Hollywood. And if you will let it come in, I would greatly appreciate it. He said, I don't know about that. He said, I let you send this story out, and they bought it. Now it's gotten around, and since that check of yours came, and it's been noised about this place, I've discovered a lot of writers in here. And really, I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to do. We have no facilities here to take care of that. Well, I said, I do wish you would let me do this because I know you're a man of goodwill, and I know that you believe in the rehabilitation of men, and that you want to do everything that you possibly can to help anybody reconstruct his life. And certainly this would be of great benefit to me if you would allow this. He was a good man, and my appeal was pretty strong too. And he said, well, I'll let you have it, but I hope this doesn't go too far. And so he let it come in. And I began to study that and send out more manuscripts through the warden, and every one of them came back. Couldn't sell a thing. I thought to myself, I might have done better if I'd stayed with my first textbook. But I was glad that I studied it. And I did learn something about it in that course. I never have been able to master punctuation. So I usually just send an extra envelope of punctuation marks along with the manuscript and suggest that they fit them in. There must be someone around there who knows where they belong. I sent in release. I wrote a little letter about the punctuation. And I got a letter back from a Mr. Zuber, who became my editor at Harper's. And he said, I will have to admit that I've never seen punctuation after this fashion. But he said, we'll put a girl to work on it, and we'll get all those marks out, and we'll get them by and by into their right place. What we want is your thought. And they did a marvelous job, I think, on that book. And so I studied that thing, and while I was studying it, I got this vision. I was dealing with the lesson on visualization. We were told that you must see your people, see every detail. You must not only see your characters, but you must see them sympathetically, whether they're villains or rogues or whatever they are. No matter how great sinners they are, you must see them and love them and see them sympathetically and move into their lives and experience exactly what they experience. Don't write anything down that you don't experience emotionally. If your character is to cry, you must cry. You must feel what they feel. You must see through their eyes, see what they see. You must get their point of view. And you must get their attitude. You must experience their reactions and responses. You must live the life of every one of these characters you produce, otherwise you will produce wooden people. People who do not exist in actuality. Mere figments of an imagination. And they just urge that you've got to get reality. You can't just sit down and type somebody and stick him in a story and get him up a tree, then unable to get him down, have a lightning strike him. It's a living thing. And I began to see that's what Jesus' parables are. They're living. And I began to see that fiction was truth and non-fiction was only a half-truth. That the only true literature in the modern world was fiction. That newspaper reporting was never true, only partially true. Newspaper reporting only dealt with facts. Fiction dealt with motives plus facts. And it said, here is a lady walks out of a department store, and she walks down the street. Over here, lurking in the vestibule of another store, is a man with his hand in his pocket on a gun. He's waiting to kill her. And she walks by, and he steps out and pulls his gun and shoots her. And it said the newspapers report that just exactly as it happened. But it isn't true. It's only factual truth. The fiction writer comes along and describes this lady, goes into her subconscious mind and her character, digs deep into her and finds the reasons and motives that are in her that are wooing her to her death. And then it goes into this man's life and gets the motives to why he's going to step out and kill her. And when those motives come in contact with the actions, then the thing is true. And so it is that Jesus says, I speak these things in parables. These things are true. That parable of the prodigal son is fiction, and it's the truest thing in life. And so I was studying that visualization of seeing the people I was to write about, and the scene they had laid out for me to visualize was in New York, in a certain shabby street lined with tenement houses in New York. It was an early dusk and raining somewhat after the fashion we've been having here, and the streets were empty, and I was alone on the street. And I had my collar pulled up around me, and I was leaning close to the buildings as I walked along. And suddenly I stepped back into the doorway of a cheap flophouse hotel. And then I was supposed to look across into a tenement house window on the second floor of a shabby fire trap across the street. And I looked up, and there I saw briefly the face of a young woman that was rather pale and frightened and bloodless. And then she retreated quickly back into the room. And with the omnipotence of the author, I walked across the street walked up the stair, laid hold on the handle of her door and opened it and walked in. I could see her, but she couldn't see me. And there I found a meanly appointed room. Practically no furniture in it. There was a cheap Ingersoll clock on a little shelf on the wall. And the hands pointed to 12. I determined that to be midnight. There was a box on one side of the room, and in the box a lot of rags, and among the rags a tiny baby, possibly not more than a couple of weeks old. And bending over this baby, very poorly dressed, was this young woman. And I could see that she was suffering from malnutrition, possibly anemia. And then I was supposed to ask a lot of questions and get the answers, and then put the questions and the answers together and bring them out to a logical climax. And that would be my story. And so I got that far as to see the room and to ask a few questions and get the answers. I asked, who is this young woman? Is this child born out of wedlock? Where is the father? And why all this penury here? And as I asked the questions, the answers came and fitted into the puzzle of the story. And I was moving along toward the end of a tragedy. Then suddenly the whole thing was blocked out. And where I was visualizing from here, there appeared right there and right out in front of me, not this scene that I could see so plainly, but another scene that was superimposed upon me. And it was the scene, the picture of a five-pointed star. And just below the star was a sun halfway over the horizon. Up here was the star, here was the sun. So I had to give up. That stayed right there. And I gave up concentrating on the lesson. And during the night that would appear. Then finally during the day, if I'd close my eyes, it would appear. And eventually it got so it was there when my eyes were opened, and I became frightened about it. And wondered if I hadn't, through concentration, somehow or other disorganized some phase of my brain, possibly gotten some kind of an injury there through intense concentration on this thing with which I was not familiar. And I went to the old life-termer of whom I spoke last night and confided it with him and told him that I was really frightened about it and wondered if it was some kind of a mental state that was not good. And he said, no, I don't believe that it is, but give me a little time and I'll pray about it and think about it. And if I get anything on it, I will let you know. That afternoon, he came with the symbols drafted onto a piece of paper. And we sat down, and he said, that is your name. I said, my name. He said, yes, that is your name. You say you get it right here? I said, yes. Well, he said, it is a daily star. This sun is halfway over the horizon. Therefore, it's daylight. It's shining in daylight. And if you transpose the words Daily Star, it will give you Starr Daily. And that will be your name. And it will mean a way of life. And he went back into the Sermon on the Mount. And he said, let your life shine. Let your life so shine that men seeing this good example will be constrained and persuaded. It's a very rigid and rigorous way of life. It's a way of discipline. It is a way of transformation of everything that you've been. It's an entirely new way. It has been given to you by the mercy and the grace of God. And you have free will. You have the power of consent also conferred upon you by the grace of God. You have the right of choice. You can take this way, or you can turn it down. And if you take it, I would suggest that you do it after long and serious and solemn meditation. And don't leap at it, for it bears a great many responsibilities. And you will find that it is a way of life not easy to follow. It is full of many valleys as well as many victories. There are mountain tops on it and deep valleys and gullies. There's a lot of beautiful appointments with God in it, and there's a lot of disappointments with men in it. You will find it full of laughter, and you will find it full of tears. Oh, think about it very seriously, and when you make your decision, let me know. And he said, I will interpret it for you. After about a week, I finally said, by the mercy and the power and the grace of God, knowing that I have no strength within myself, that there is nothing in me but weakness, and that there is no power but the power of God, I hereby on this day, I stated the date, accept this gift from heaven, and with God's help, will do everything that I can do to go this way. And it was done. And then I went to him and told him, I've made my choice. The cards are down. That's that. Come what may. And he said, all right, I will explain it to you. You know your name. I would suggest that you never write anything under that name that you could not let your daughter read. Never do anything to abuse that. And what you say under that name, let it be wholesome. Let it be as true as you know how to receive the truth. And whatever it is you write, whether fiction or non-fiction, make it redemptive. Let it be redemptive. And things will turn out all right. Then he said that star is a cross. And it's up to you to turn a 5-pointed star into a cross. This way it's a 5-pointed star. It's up to you to bring this bottom shaft together and turn the star into a cross. And you will do it by living. Not by theory, not by speculation, not by analysis, not by any kind of mental magic or gymnastics of the mind. You'll do it under discipline and by living what it needs. Then he took the star, point by point, and analyzed it for me. And when he did, he showed me what the human personality is precisely. This top point up here is the moral department in every human personality. And that is the point that connects you with the moral universe, and through the moral universe with God. And he said, "You've been bankrupt there for a good many years, haven't you?" I said, "Yes, all my life." "You haven't had a great deal of moral courage, have you?" I said, "I haven't got it now." He said, "I perceived as much when you allowed them to boo you out of the chapel when you tried to speak. You've got convictions, and they were in the nature of reality when they came to you. But they are not reality. They are not reality until you make them so. They will be reality when you have the courage of your convictions. And until you do have the courage of your convictions, you're going to wound Christ. For you're going to be ashamed of him on many occasions. You will be afraid to speak for him. For public opinion will have more importance to you than the opinion of God. Even when you are strongly urged to speak out boldly for this Christ who has done so much for you, you will fail him as Peter failed him, and fall silent and deny him and wound him and render shame unto him, because you will be sensitive to other people's opinions and not sensitive to God's opinion." I said, "That's right." He said, "Don't bother about the little mediocre immoralities. Get your attention fixed on the big immorality, the top immorality, the lack of moral stamina to speak out boldly for what you know and believe, to speak your convictions without fear or favor. That's the main thing. These other things are merely children, a little child playing on the seashore. This is the big thing. The worst and most treacherous thing in all the world," he said, "is the fear of public opinion. When it comes to facing God." Well, I said, "I'm bankrupt there. And I'll have to be honest with you. I've got more concern for the adverse opinions of these convicts in here than I have for God. I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid to speak out my convictions. They did boo me out of the chapel. I'm afraid to be persecuted. I'm afraid to be criticized. I'm afraid to be thought of in an adverse way. I really, deep down inside of me, still crave the friendship of these men in here who have no identification with God at all, who are children of the devil." Well, he said, "You're really bankrupt there." I said, "About this mental point over here, I said, I'm making a little effort over there to shake up a few brain cells and get them to working." I told him that I was taking this course, and that was an effort to stir up a little brain matter. But he said, "On the whole,